there was a poll. Susanna also found this for me. Axios poll, exclusive poll. Most college students shrug at nationwide protests. So I just want to make it not act like, oh, Iranian students are better than American students, okay? Because what you're seeing is actually not the majority of the students. You know, people act like this is like, oh, US is falling. Look how Americans are anti-Israel. This is a minority within a minority. So not only these university students does not represent most Americans, they don't even represent most American students, right? So only a small minority, 8% of college students have participated. Right? Students ranked the conflict in the Middle East as the least important issue facing them out of 9 options. The survey found that three times as many college students blame Hamas for the current situation in Gaza than they do President Joe Biden. Okay, so mostly they blame Hamas. A large majority, 81% of students support holding protesters accountable. 81% of university students in America. A majority also said that they oppose the protest tactics. 67% say occupying campus buildings is unacceptable. Another 9% said blocking pro-Israel students from parts of the campus is unacceptable. Okay, so I just want to make sure I defend American students as well. But also there's another poll. So these are just university students, right? There's another poll, Harvard Caps Harris poll. And let me show you the findings of these are just Americans. Okay, so let me actually go back to this one. This was from April. This was late April this year, asked from within the United States with a very large sample size, right? So you can see most Americans have a favorable view towards Israel. Most Americans still have a favorable view towards Israel and have an unfavorable view to Antifa, to Palestinian Authority, and extremely unfavorable to Hamas. You can see that they're at the bottom of the list, right? You could see the poll shows, okay, so the question was, should Hamas be allowed to continue to run Gaza, or does Hamas needs to be removed from running Gaza? And you can see 78% of Americans think that Hamas should not be allowed to continue to run Gaza. All right, so guys, remember when you feel like, oh, America is falling and stuff? It's not the case. Americans are still pretty heavy toward anti-Hamas. Okay, the concerning part is that if you segment this by ages, as when you go to Generation Z, you can see it's 53%. They're saying Hamas should not be allowed to run Gaza. So if you go to older people, oh no, actually it's only 47. Wow, a minority. Okay, so this is bad. So if you look at 55 and above, 90%, more than 90% of people above 55 think that Hamas should be removed from running Gaza, but only 47% of people below age 24 believe that. So a minority, less than half. That's horrible. 53% think that Hamas should be continue to allowed to run Gaza. So this is mostly a Generation Z problem. But here's the question: are they going to grow out of this? Like, is this a problem for our future, or is this just immaturity that people grow out of? So that's the question here. And then let's go to this question. But again, the good part is that 78% are against Hamas running Gaza, right? So the next question, do NATO countries have responsibility to support Israel against Iranian aggression or not? Okay, so when it says Iranian aggression, I try to read it as Islamic Republic's aggression because I don't consider Islamic Republic to be Iran. I know I'm being picky over that, but it's important for me to do that. And you can see 67% think that NATO should support Israel against the Islamic Republic's aggression. support Iran. Okay, so this is weird because this is the Democrats are more aligned with supporting NATO to support, because as much as Republicans are more pro-Israeli, but they're also not very much in favor of NATO. But Democrats are more in line with supporting NATO, supporting Israel, which is interesting. We have 71% for Democrats and 68% for Republicans. So here's another question. As a strong, so there's two questions and these two questions show that a strong majority of voters continue to support Israel in the conflict, and 2/3 feel Israel is trying to minimize casualties. Amazing. So these are Americans. This is not the university students. These are all Americans, right? So the first question was, in this conflict, do you support more Israel or more of Hamas? And 80% say they support Israel. And the second question, I'm like, the question was not Israel versus Palestine, because that would be the wrong question to ask. Israel is not fighting Palestine. Israel is fighting Hamas. The second question is, do you think Israel is trying to avoid civilian casualties in fighting its war against Hamas, or not trying to avoid such casualties? 67% said that it is trying to avoid casualties. Amazing. 67%. That's more than I would have guessed that. But the 80% is also amazing. 80% of Americans pick Israel over Hamas. That's a very good number. Right? So look at this one. A strong majority of voters think Israel should move forward with an operation in Rafah to finish the war. 72%. That is a very good high number. Very good number. And also something else that you could go pay attention to, they also break it down to the people who are following the war closely and the people who are not. So the people who are following the war closely, 77%, they support Israel finishing the job in Rafah. And the people who are not following, they only 23% follow. That shows that the more educated they are about the conflict, the more you support Israel's actions, the more you understand why Israel is doing what it's doing. Okay, so this is a very telling comparison, right? So fake question alert, the framing of questions matter. So you have two questions. Again, this is why you have to be careful about the polls and how it was conducted, and whether it was this is why it's important that you look at people who do polls scientifically and in ways that it's proven to you for you to get you the results that actually is a reflection of reality. And they demonstrate that here, right? So the question was, there was two questions. Say, do you favor or oppose a permanent ceasefire in Gaza? So do you want a permanent ceasefire or you oppose a ceasefire? Most people, 70% of people said they're in favor of a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, right? And everybody should be in favor of a permanent ceasefire in Gaza eventually, because we don't want endless war. We want countries to defend themselves, participate in wars so that they could end wars, right? But if you ask this question like this, a lot of people will take this and like, oh, stop the war, stop the war, stop the war in Rafah, because most people are in favor of ceasefire. But look, the same question is, if asked in a different way, then it flips if you ask a question more accurately. So look at the question here. Would you favor or oppose that ceasefire if it meant that Hamas was allowed to continue to hold hostages and Hamas will continue to run Gaza? Now it flips. Now 68% are opposing ceasefire and 32% are in favor of ceasefire. Because here's an interesting thing. If you want temporary ceasefire, then Israel should stop the war right now. But if you want long-lasting ceasefire, then Israel should finish the job in Rafah, because if Hamas manages to stay in power, you will have war again down the road again. This will happen over and over again. And Americans understand that. You can see that Americans understand that. Most voters think Hamas is mostly to blame for the crisis in Gaza and are split on the accuracy of the casualties coming out of Gaza. So the question is, do you think the crisis in Gaza is created mostly by Israel or mostly by Hamas? Most voting age Americans, 71%, they say Hamas. And the second question, do you think the number of 30,000 casualties in Gaza supplied by Hamas is accurate, or exaggerated by the group. So they're 50-50 on that, right? And again, I am 50. This is a very hard question to answer. I don't think I would be, based on the more evidence that I've seen now, I am more skeptical about these numbers than before. So now look at this one. 3 in 1 voters think Iran, or as I would say, the Islamic Republic of Iran, not Iran itself, the government, Iranian government is okay. But let's read it as they write it. Okay, 3 in 4 voters think Iran is responsible for the October 7th attacks, and most say Iran is to blame for the escalating conflict. So one question was, do you think that Iran is responsible for the attacks on Israel by Hamas and Hezbollah, or do you think Iran is not really behind these attacks? 75% said they're responsible. And the second question was, who do you blame more for the escalating conflict in the Middle East, Israel or Iran? And 69% answered Iran. Okay, next question. 2 in 3 vote. Why? By the way, guys, some people might ask me, like, when it comes to Iran, why would you say the Islamic Republic and not Iran? But when it comes to Israel, you would say Israel. But because the gap between the Iranian people and their government is wider than any country in the world. They could not be there's no country that the people are this separate and this different from their government. That's why they're completely different entities. Iran and the Iranian regime are different entities. Okay, so next question. 2 in 3 voters agree negotiating would not work with Iran, and the best way to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons are sanctions and isolation. Okay, I think that was the last one that I wanted to show you guys.